Okay. So what is, well, it's spelled latex. The best pronunciation I've seen is LaTeX for what this is. So basically, LaTeX is technically a typesetting language, which is, if you've ever worked in HTML or even WordPress or things like that, those are technically markup languages, which are different, but it's the same type of idea. We're kind of making a uh, code that will compile into a document, whether that's a paper or a presentation or a poster, which is basically just a document, a specific document. And actually, if you see, the presentation I'm giving now, I made entirely in LaTeX, specifically Overleaf. And I'll also share this file or this template. It is, for presentations, not the easiest to use, but for some things like I did my dissertation defense in LaTeX, it was, I think, much easier than trying to use PowerPoint. All right, so and in a couple of slides, I'll show you what does LaTeX look like, but here's just kind of a little bit of what is this LaTeX I'm talking about. So basically in plain text, we're going to, for lack of a better term, program our document. We're going to type in the words we want in our document and then some commands for how we want it formatted also. And what we have to do is compile it using some sort of editor or some sort of client. I'll be showing you Overleaf as that client for now. So what it does is it takes your code and it's going to compile it into a document, specifically a PDF, usually is the format that it's going to have. And the nice thing about the compiling process is it's going to decide what kind of the best look for your document is. Sometimes it makes good decisions, sometimes it doesn't, so there are ways to customize that. But unlike Word, really to the fourth point here, it's not what we call a WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. So when you're typing out your paper or your poster, it's just going to look like plain text code. And then in the background, at least on Overleaf, it compiles your code. So you're going to be able to see kind of what it looks like in near real time, but it's definitely not drag and drop like PowerPoint would be. But where it's really powerful is, especially for papers, longer papers or articles, if you're going to write any articles out of your research this summer, or even for your final paper, it does really good citation management, which I'll show you in the template. Referencing like figures or tables that you make is really easy compared to Word, and it can make table of contents really easy. Now, I haven't tried to do anything lengthy in Word myself in a while. I did my master's thesis in Word and it was really bad. I had so many figures and references in it. It got bogged down. Now that was 2007. I'm sure it's gotten much better in the last 13 years. But since I started using LaTeX, I haven't gone back for lengthy things to using Word. And there's a lot of packages available to it, like little toolboxes that will do special things for your document. So that's specifically LaTeX. And again, all LaTeX is this plain text that gets compiled. So we'll see that in the example in a second. So specifically, I'm going to show you Overleaf for handling LaTeX documents. So it's this client or this app, I guess I'll say, that's this cloud-based system where you can put in your LaTeX code, your LaTeX file, and you can edit it. And then in near real time, it's going to render it into the document. So it's not quite going to be real time like Word would be, but you can see pretty immediately how the changes you're making are going to look in your final document. And a tough thing for most people, especially if you're not really tech savvy, is installing LaTeX. It can be a real pain on your computer. So a great thing about Overleaf is that it's all in the cloud. There's nothing to install. There's no dependencies that can get lost. You don't have to update your different packages on a daily basis. All of that can become a real pain. Overleaf takes care of all of that. Like I said, it's going to compile nearly in real time. If you're using some other editor, if you've ever worked in LaTeX before, which probably you haven't, but if you try using a desktop client, it can be a pain because every time you want to see a change, you have to compile it, and it takes maybe a couple seconds, and then it opens up your document as a PDF. And then every small change, you have to redo that process. Another really great thing that Overleaf offers is it has you can do simultaneous editing to some degree, kind of like you could do on Google Docs and you can do on like the Office system or Office 365. You can do that, but in LaTeX, and that's really I was looking for years for something that did that. And this was the best one I've come along that allowed you to do that. Because a real hassle with using LaTeX with multiple authors is making sure everyone's on the same version of the document. That if you're just using a Google Doc, well, automatically that's going to be true. So this can do collaboration. So it's really good if you're working with your advisor and you prepare your draft document, and then um, your advisor could look at it and you can make comments like you could in Word, or you can just edit it directly. And it has a rich text mode. I've never really used this. I'll try showing you this. If you're a novice to LaTeX, there is a mode that makes it kind of like Word in how it looks. So we'll take a look at that too. And there's a free membership to Overleaf that's really powerful. There is a paid one, which I have because I'm I guess Overleaf in a way sponsors me and sponsors this talk, in that they gave me a professional account to be kind of an Overleaf evangelist. So I have the professional version. There are added features to it, but I was using the basic one for probably 2 years, and I never really felt like I needed the professional one until they gave it to me. The professional version lets you synchronize your files with like Dropbox or GitHub. It's nice to have a backup of all your files automatically. Not really needed. You can use track changes with the professional one that you can't with the free one. I don't find that too big of a deal to not be able to have. And you can only have one direct collaborator with the free one, but there are ways around that, even with the free version. With the professional one, you can have as many simultaneous collaborators as you want. Yeah, so we're almost at the point where I'll actually show you what I'm talking about, but I'm going to talk about 2 use cases and show you templates and play with the software a little bit for how you can use it. So what I mostly use Overleaf and LaTeX for is writing articles or longer papers. So if you have a class paper that I would say maybe once you hit like 5 pages or so, or if it's something that's going to have a lot of references in it, I think LaTeX can be a good choice for preparing your document that way. If you're working on an article, let's say the research this summer really pans out and your advisor wants to try to proceed into a publication, a lot of the journals will have a template that you can just download and then put in your text and your figures into it, and it's automatically going to format it correctly. A big pain if you've never submitted a journal article is just the formatting that the journal is looking for. If you try to do it in Word, there might be like 100 rules you have to follow of margins or font size or how many columns to make, that if they don't give you a template, it can be really difficult to work through. And the nice thing is if you are going to submit it to if you might have to resubmit your paper to different journals, you don't really have to usually change too much if you just download the new template, put in all the work you've already done on your paper, and you'll just reformat it for how that publication wants it. Oh, and another thing is if one publication wants references, say in APA format for some reason, and another one wants it in IEEE, or another one wants it in the medical one, I can't think of what that's called, you can keep your bibliographies the same, and it'll just render it in the new citation style or bibliography style that they want. Also, it can handle high resolution graphics, which I'll show in a second, which might come up, especially if you're working, let's say, in MATLAB or generating your own figures in some sort of software. It does great work with the bibliography, which I'll show, and it does really nice equation writing. So again, this whole thing was prepared in LaTeX, this presentation, so you can make really nice looking and easy to do equations compared to like the Microsoft equation editor can be really tough to use. So putting any of the equations in is really convenient here once you know kind of the code for doing so. All right, so finally, let me show you the template I prepared that you can use for your article, if it lets me. All right, there it is. This isn't necessarily the final version, nor is it necessarily right now in the complete format that they're looking for, although I'm not sure they're really sticklers for how it looks. I took this from a a template I made for my system dynamics class and vibrations class and kind of pared it down to be a little bit easier to work with. So here, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse or not, but there's kind of three panels typically in Overleaf. This leftmost one are your files. So if you see here right now with the template, I have the tech file, TEX. That is what's showing here. That is like the plain text code that is your document. I have this bib file. If I click on that, this is what a bib file looks like. I'll get to that in a couple minutes here. But this is your bibliography entries that you're going to use. I've seeded this with a couple of them. You're probably not going to actually use these, but that way the document will compile. I'll talk about the bib in a minute. And then I have one example here of a figure. This is an EPS figure, but you can upload PNGs, JPEGs, bitmaps, TIFFs, a lot of different formats here, and it'll be able to integrate it into your paper. So what you can do is you can click on this little upload button, and you can drag or you can select figures that you want in your document. But unlike Word, where you can just drag and drop them, here you have to put in the actual file into this system, and then it will automatically insert it into your document. Okay, so most of the time you're going to work right in this tech file. All right, so this middle panel here is where we actually do our work. So you see here, there's a lot of kind of code that looks, again, kind of like WordPress or HTML. So we're giving it like some commands here. Most of these you won't need to change, but we can put like some aspects or things about our document in here. So for example, there's a title class or a title property of our document. So here I'm just calling at the moment MCRU project report. And then at the same time, if you look at the rightmost window, this is where it's actually rendering the document. Right? So it's making a cover page here, which maybe you want, maybe you don't. That's what line 16 is doing, is making this title page. But we can put in here the title of our report, which you'll retitle into something better. Your name, so this will probably be just you as the author on this document. So you are probably not Hingle McCringleberry, so you will need to put your name in there, and then the date it's due. So all this is generated automatically on this first page using this make title. That's not really the crucial part of this document, but that's where it starts. All right, so this is where we actually do the work. So a nice thing here is, again, we can give it these commands for how to format and section our document. So we see here, for example, it has this nice header for section 1, section 2, these subheaders here. So I'm doing that like in 22. I want the first section to be called background and introduction. And it's going to auto number a lot of things you do as you're going through this. And this is probably the type of sections you're going to want in your final document, but these you can edit as you and your advisor see fit here. And then you see, like in 24, I'm just basically writing the text that will go into my document. So we see that the words I wrote down over here are showing up in these two paragraphs over here. I do a paragraph break by this extra space between the two paragraphs. But even within this, I can do some formatting changes. So like, for example, you see here, brief is in italics. And we see here in the code that the word brief, I put in this command, this text IT or text italics. And then the things I want in italics are in this these braces, the curly braces. Now, Overleaf specifically does support some shortcuts. So let's just say I want rundown to be bold. Like in Word, I can press Control B around it if I highlight it, and it does make it bold. And you want to make sure that your auto compile is on. So we can see it's going to update our change, and now rundown in the right is in bold. All right, so maybe I don't want it in bold. Maybe I want that also in italics. So a lot of these, all these commands you can look up on Google really quickly for what you want to do. There's a good community around LaTeX. Or I can get rid of that extra formatting there, and I'm left with just that plain, it says rundown. Another thing that I'm doing here is, so if we see making a citation, just for example here, so corresponding number like this, bracket 1. If we look at the source file, the tech file over here, I'm putting here this command, this cite command. So this backslash cite, and then the thing I want to cite. So I want to cite this thing called McKay 1992 Bayesian. If we look in the bib file, I have this document here is called, or I have this information for a document with this keyword, McKay 1992 Bayesian. This keyword matches what I have in my document. And where do we get this code? Well, what we can do is we can look on Google Scholar, for example, if we find a paper that is interesting to us. I'll just do find a paper that Dr. Rudy and I wrote. Okay, so if we do a Google Scholar search, we look at the PDF, we like it, and we want to put it into our bibliography from Google Scholar, and other things support this too. We can click on this little quotes here, and it comes up with a lot of these built-in styles, but you can also click this BibTeX at the bottom, and what it does is it brings up the BibTeX code. So I can just take all of this, copy it, go back to my file here, if I can get there, and I can just paste it into my bib file. And now I've added that to my bibliography. So it's not always correct, but it has all the information for that paper now in my bib file. So if I come up here to main.tech, and let's say I want to cite something else, or cite my new paper, I can do this cite tab. And the nice thing is that, at least in Overleaf, it'll come up with the whole list. So if I know the paper is this Rudy 2018 comprehensive, I can put that in, let it recompile. And now you see it added another reference. It automatically knows it's 4. So we don't have to worry about resetting the numbering every time, because let's say, oops, I actually want to move this citation earlier for whatever reason. I want to put it up here. Well, because it's compiling it, it's looking through. Now it automatically will number this as number 1, and then it renumbers everything else conveniently for us. That's a really great feature, because trying to do that by hand, especially, anytime you move one thing, you're going to have to renumber the whole document. So this automatically does it. And what it's also doing is, if we go to the bottom of our document, it's automatically updating our reference list in the correct style. So number 1 is that paper I just added with all of its information, and it renumbered 2, 3, and 4 likewise. All right, so bibliography management, it does a great job with. All right, don't want to dwell too long on this part, because I might get to the poster stuff as well. But we can also put in an equation. We have this equation environment. And we see here, if we double click, it typically takes us to the right place in the document here. We can put this equation, we can put a label in, and I want the equation, this is just a simple one, F equals MA on line 35. And if we go over here, it put it into the document, and it styled it very nicely for us, and it automatically numbered our equation as this was the first one, so it labeled it as 1. Now, F equals MA, that's not tough to make, but if we go something more complicated, like down here, this third equation, if we know the right code to put in, we are able to do more complicated math stuff. So here I wanted like this nice fraction here. I have a fraction command. I want dy on top, dx on the bottom. It can handle cosine, and it just formats it really nicely. It handles like prime notation. Again, if you Google the equation you want to make or the things you want in your equation, there's going to be a Google document somewhere about that. Right, so you can look through this this document if you're interested in, or I can follow up with you if you're interested in. I should move on here, since it's been longer than I thought on this section. But you can do sectioning and do all that nicely. Again, I'll put the link to the template if you want to play with that. Let me go back to talking about the poster. Again, I'll do this just briefly. There's a template for this. But LaTeX can make posters, I think, really well compared to trying to do it in PowerPoint. Because with PowerPoint, especially if you have a lot of images and you have to make it in real size, I think your posters are like 32 by 36 or something. I have the right size in the template for you. PowerPoint, because you're working at the real size, really is sluggish once you try to put in all your nice backgrounds of formatting and your figures there. And LaTeX is really speedy with it. So PowerPoint I find to be a huge pain. uh, the uh, Overleaf or LaTeX does a really good job of usually of spacing your poster out. That again, PowerPoint won't do. Anytime if you want to like add a bullet point at one section in a PowerPoint one, you have to manually move everything around, and it I think is a huge pain. Trying to center everything is really really rough in PowerPoint. And also you can automate the color palette, which I'll talk about later as well. I think really nicely in LaTeX. That might be harder in PowerPoint to make sure that you've changed every font color consistently or every background color consistently. Um, I'll transition a little bit to poster creation and then go back to the poster template. So some of you are going to choose to make a poster instead of a presentation for your for the symposium in a couple of weeks. So I want to talk a little bit about what is a poster, then I'll go back to the template, and then we'll explore some example posters from there too. Um, but I'll say first of all, a poster, I think a good poster is tougher to make and more time consuming than a presentation. I think, and for the reasons, at least for the second bullet point, I'll talk about in a second here. Um, you have that finite space to work in, whereas a presentation, it's more of you only really have a time constraint. With a poster, you have somewhat a time constraint and a geometry constraint there. But what is this poster? In a little way, it's kind of like a science fair poster you did in middle school or high school, but at that next level to be a much more professional product. But really, in short, a poster should be an advertisement of your work or your group's work for this particular project. So that's really how you want to think of it. First of all, when you're approaching, where do I even start? You're trying to advertise the work you did. And what makes a poster difficult to make well and is that you have to I think you have to think on three levels when you are preparing your poster, because I find typically now in a virtual environment it might be a little bit different, but if you have a physical poster, these are the three kind of audiences or viewpoints that you want to think about when you're making the poster. So one, typically at a conference or a symposium, your poster will be up maybe for like the whole day, depending, maybe you have to take it down or not, but usually your poster will be up when you are not at your poster. So those are kind of the first two bullet points of how your poster is going to be used. Is one, it has to work to advertise your research when you're not there. So the first thing you want to think about is using your images and your captions to tell a very brief story of what you did. Because this is, I would say, the first audience that's going to encounter your poster is they're just going and they're really quickly looking at posters. Maybe the title catches their eye and they want to know a snapshot of what you did. So what they're going to do is they're going to look at your, let's say, four figures, and you want those four figures and I like a decent sized caption under them. But with those four figures and captions, can they get a sense of what you did, of maybe the experiment you ran, results that you found, and why those results might matter? Just from those four figures and captions, they're going to spend, again, I don't know, 90 seconds, let's say, doing that. So you need to really craft the figures you choose and the captions you write to tell that really quick story of what you did. Now, then there's the second audience, or maybe that same person looks very quickly at what you did and is interested and wants to know more. Now you have the rest of your poster, you have the text and maybe some tables to fill in a little bit more detail of what you did. So that's where the body of the poster is going to come in. You're adding on to the detail, you're explaining a little bit more, but briefly telling the story of what you did. And then the third audience or the third purpose of the poster is typically there's a poster session where you will be standing there. And in this virtual environment, I think you're preparing like a 2-minute talk guiding us through your poster. So this is kind of that third audience. So here you also want to be able to use your poster as, I kind of call it like a slideshow, I would say, is that you can present your work and refer to your poster and logically guide the audience or the viewer through what you did through the poster, through the images of the poster, and so forth. So the third one is you are there to guide the viewer through your poster. The first two, it has to also be set up well so that the viewer can guide themselves through the poster. I think this is tough to accomplish, this third point here, and your advisor might disagree with me on this, but I think I strive to have a total of 250 words in the body of my poster. That is not a lot. Probably as we go through the examples, you're going to see people are writing 1,000 words on their poster. Now, 250 might not really be achievable, but the point here really is as few words as possible in the body. Let the pictures tell the story primarily, or make very succinct points in the body. Do not write full paragraphs out. The intro might be a little bit of an exception to that, but you want to be really short. So drop articles, make things fit really nicely there. Now, captions, I do like a longer caption. So again, that first audience can get the point of what I'm trying to present there. But very few words, be very sparing with your words, and really think about every word you're putting into the body is what you want to go from the get-go, or kind of write it up initially and then really start to pare it down. One, this gives you more room for more pictures. I think pictures are really crucial for posters. And two, that second audience doesn't want to read a whole paper. They want to get a little bit more detail as they go through your poster, but they're not there to read a full paper, or even like a short paper. And citations. Typically in your intro section, you're going to want a couple citations to just kind of build your case. But don't go wild on the poster like you would in a paper. I'd say maybe three to five references is fine to build your case, which I'll talk about on the next slide. And we'll look at examples in a couple minutes here that reinforce this and things to think about as we are looking at these posters. So how do you want to split your poster up? Again, it might be a little bit different. Talk to your advisor depending on the type of work you did and what you got done over the summer. But typically you'll have a short intro. You really want to, and Dawn really, I think, has been talking about this the whole time, make us care about what you did. It might be one or two bullet points. Why is your work important? Or what is the larger context of your work? The so what that sets up what you did. And then a couple of previous works, related works that kind of set the stage for what you are doing. So this is where you'll drop a couple citations of another group did this with, I don't know, 2 amps. I'm doing with 5 amps, whatever. Things that are building context around what you did technically. And then also the broader case of where does your work fit in to a larger problem. So that's what the intro should get across. Then your methods. This will be different depending on what you do. So I do often a lot of experimental work. So I would talk about how did we collect data from, if I'm using human subjects, how many people did we use? How did we instrument them? What was the sample rate we used? That would go into my method section. If you're doing more of a simulation, like a finite element or something, then the methods are going to talk about what was the solver that you used, what software did you use, how many elements did you use, things like that. So basically, some information, again, it's a poster, so you don't have to be super thorough, but some information that someone who's familiar with it could recreate it or understand how your approach to addressing the problem. Then get into the results. So this is where if I collected data, I processed it, I made some figures. Some of the stuff I do, I might have like histograms here, or I don't know, box plots, things like that. If you are doing FEA work, that's just coming to mind here. Maybe you'll have a nice colored picture of the stresses in your object after you ran your FEA code. If it's computational fluid dynamics, again, maybe like a false color image of the velocities or the vortices, or you'll have in here your vector graphic. So that results section is really kind of the pure results, graphs, tables. Discussion then is where you're going to talk about those results. What did the results mean? So I would say the caption of your figures on a poster should also talk about results or discussion. a little bit, tell the audience what these results mean. A picture, a graph will never speak for itself. You need to tell the audience what this means. So the discussion portion, maybe a couple bullet points of interpreting for the audience. And then finally, a conclusion and future work. What should the audience remember about the one or two takeaways from your poster that the audience should think about in the future? Or again, this is an advertisement for other work. So maybe there will be a paper coming out of this work. So what are two things you want the person to remember so that they will hopefully look at your paper later and use it for their own work? And then some future work. What are the next steps? Since you've only been working on this for like 10 weeks, 8 weeks or so, you probably didn't get a ton done, and that's okay. But you want to say, how does your work fit into, again, the larger context, even of your advisor's project? What can be built on in the next year, say, to expand the work that you have been looking at? I'll just briefly talk about authorship, and we'll see it in the template also. So author order, this is how I always address it. You will be the first author of the poster, and I like to sometimes put the poster presenter as in bold, as we'll see. Then any graduate students you might have worked with, or maybe other undergraduate students that are authors, should be on the list of authors. Maybe you didn't work with any, that's fine. If you have an advisor at UP, put their name second to last. If you're just working with your Berks advisor, then don't worry about 2 or 3. And then I would say the last author should be your Berks advisor. Again, talk to your advisor about this. Maybe they will feel differently. This is, I think, pretty much the standard that you should use, though. And make sure you include all the proper affiliations. You'll see on my poster example what that's going to look like. And other people who had less major contributions to your work. So maybe this summer it's not as relevant, but like if Roy built you something or helped you set up an experimental piece, or you consulted with another faculty on how to use some piece of software, but they didn't add to your technical, they didn't run the experiment for you, but they helped you set it up. Maybe they deserve to be in the acknowledgments, but they're certainly not an author. Authors are people who directly had impact on also like the intellectual work that you built. Acknowledgments is where you put people that really contributed more to the maybe technical aspects of the work. All right, let me show you the template briefly. I'm going way over, but that's probably okay. All right, so here's the template I built. And again, I'll have the link to you. And it's the right size and everything. So we can look a little bit at the anatomy of this poster. So we see here, and you can play with this template all you want, the colors, and I'll talk about those in a little bit as well. So at the top, some really nice title that's going to get across what is your poster, what is it talking about? So you might even have here like a result. So I don't know, you could say, I don't know, 1,2-methyl ethyl chloride does not kill coronavirus. Like that would be a pretty good title if that were true from your work, because someone's going to read it and say, oh, okay, like there's a statement right there. This poster is going to show how we reach this conclusion. Or I don't know, I'm in a coronavirus mood. I guess you can say like coronavirus spreads 8 feet when you sneeze. That's a good title, and then you're gonna have the work below it to show how you showed that to be true. So making a good title is a challenge, and you want to think about that because that's going to attract the attention of the viewer. That's going to make them want to stop and look at your poster at one of those 3 levels that I talked about before. And then you want the authors, and you see here I have the authors and I have affiliations here, how I would typically do it for a poster. So in this example, I have 3 authors. I made the poster. I did most of the work. I'm the first author on this paper. For some reason, it didn't bold my name, even though I told it to. It might just be how this template is working, but that's okay. Then maybe I worked with another student or a graduate student, Sally. So she is the second author. And then my advisor, my advisor, typically the PI, the principal investigator, is last. And that was, again, the renowned Dr. Hingle McCringleberry. And then we see how I did the affiliations here. So I'm affiliated with these two departments, mechanical engineering at Berks and kinesiology at Berks. So I have both of those affiliations. Sally's student was maybe a graduate student I worked with at UP in engineering science. So you see that she's affiliated with only 3. And then my advisor, Hingle McCringleberry, is also in mechanical engineering and kinesiology. So you just want to make sure that you have everyone's departments correct on this. And then definitely include contact information, especially if it's at a real conference, at a physical conference, where someone might want to follow up with you if they don't see you at your poster ever. So typically an email address and your website, or maybe your LinkedIn page if you're a student, or like I use ResearchGate, maybe that would be a good link to have there. And then here I do have built into my template the Berks logo and the MCREU logo. I think we want both of those on your poster somewhere, so I just have those at the top. And then I have it just sectioned off into those sections I talked about before with this color scheme. The blue here, I am using the official Penn State blue, which you can change if you want to, but don't go crazy with the colors, as I'll talk about after this slide. But this is based on a template I used for the conference I went to 2 years ago. But all of this you're free to modify, change as you want. So I like breaking it up a little bit with these backgrounds, just so we can see how these sections are existing. Now, when you add more text, it's going to kind of stretch out some of these sections because, again, LaTeX is going to try to decide the best look for your poster. So you do have to kind of massage it a little bit. But if you add like a fourth bullet point here, it's going to shift everything down, and it might shift some of these bullet points into this second column here. And that might be okay, or you might want to do some fine adjustment at the end as you're building your poster. So you see here, I have fairly succinct bullet points that I have. Again, trying to keep the total body text to 250 words if possible. I drop a couple of citations here, which then at the references at the end I am referring back to. I have, in my example, these 4 figures that help tell my story. And like I said, I like a long caption. So you see here, my captions are like 4 lines long. And they give some more information that if you're only looking at figures and captions, you're still getting a good amount of information. Your advisor might not like long captions, so just be prepared to discuss how much information you want in the caption versus how much you want in the body. And then I have the sections broken up, acknowledgments on the poster, and future research. So I'll provide the link to this if you're interested. So I'll move on to a little bit more on posters. So one thing that we've definitely seen in the past when people are making their first or 5th poster, I still have this issue and have to think about it. Your poster does not need to tell everything you did over the summer or everything you did for your master's thesis or your PhD dissertation. That's not its purpose. Pick the most interesting or one interesting thread and carry that through your poster. Don't try to do everything at once. Again, tell one story. So maybe you're leaving out a lot of hours you spent doing things, or a whole experiment that you ran, or a whole branch of code that you wrote. That's okay. That'll be captured in your paper later, or maybe a different poster. Tell one cohesive story that gets one cool thing across that you found in your research. I suggest that you pick a 3-color palette for your poster. And I'll show this website in a second here. People go crazy with the colors they're using, or they're trying to use a gradient, and they're trying to do just way too much. I like maybe your header text is one color, your body text is another, and maybe you're using a background color, or maybe just background color behind your text like I'm doing. So I found I'm not a graphic designer. Most of us are not. If you're into that, then maybe you already know what you're doing. But I have here, here it is. So this is the link in my document, color space. I think this or similar things do a really nice job for those of us that are not in graphic design, where let's say there's one color we really do like for our poster. I don't know, let's say like this darker green, for example. So we say, oh, that would be a really nice color for our background. Right? So I picked this forest green. And what this site and other sites are going to do is using actual knowledge from graphic design and how colors work together, it's going to give you these palettes, these suggested palettes for colors that work together. And then we can kind of play with them. So here, maybe this cube palette is nice because it picks out these three colors. And we can say, okay, well, maybe this green we want to use for our background, and then this whatever color this kind of is, kind of brownish green, we want to use for our text. And then this light one, maybe we want that to be a background color. So actually, maybe we would say the header color, we want the forest green, the body text, we want this middle color, and then maybe the background to some of our text blocks, we want this very light color. So things like that. So that way we're not going to accidentally pick clashing colors, or maybe the small switch palette, but things like that. It gives you an idea of colors that work together for your poster. So I really like to use this to get some ideas. And then it tells you what the code for that color is. And typically, even if you're using PowerPoint, you can use that code to make things the right color. All right, so making good color choices, pleasing color choices, and not using a ton of them, I think is really important. And then here's some other good resources as I go into the examples here that I find helpful. The first bullet point is I took some of the information from this one. So I'll show quickly that. No, it's this link. I think this is a really nice resource for thinking about putting your poster together. It's the Animate Your Science one. I don't agree with everything on here, but you can think about your content and your poster design. It's about colors, etc. From this. So I would say this is definitely something you want to look at before and during you're making your poster. Like their poster example, I don't love. I think it's a little bit sparse for some of the technical stuff we're doing, but the other information on this website is really nice. The last link I have there, this Astrobytes one, I kind of hesitated to put it, but I did see a lot of these style of posters at the symposium last year and at my professional conference. I'll say up front, I don't like this approach, but some advisors do and some students really do, this better poster approach. This is kind of the gist of what it is. Basically, it takes your main finding and makes that, this is like 2/3 of the poster. I think it's a huge waste of space. I think for technical things like we're doing, I think this might lend itself well for something maybe in the social sciences where you're not going to have as many figures and you really do want to get one point across from the research that you did. I think this can be a nice way to go, that your clutter is at a minimum. People know exactly what you did. I would personally recommend against this. I would not want my students to make it this way, but it's an interesting thought that is I've seen growing in popularity at different conferences there. But it's worth taking a look, but do not go down this route without talking to your advisor. I would guess that most of us really don't love this style of poster. We're not sold on it yet. All right, so let's look at a couple of examples that we can kind of critique and look at from previous years here. All right, so let's look at poster A, and it's okay if you want to unmute. Let's just comment on, as we look at this, I blacked out their name for anonymity. I think this is from last year. I think this is also not the final version of the poster. So as you're looking at this, what do you see about this poster that doesn't work, that you would definitely change even in the draft stage? So unmute, it's fine, or in the chat, Dr. Panah, if you want to moderate the chat if people are doing it there.
Something that stands out to me is that there are just a lot of words. I'm just just blasted with words.
Yeah, and I mean, the first time I made a poster, the first couple times, I put a lot of words in. I think it's a really common mistake to do. But again, keep in mind that, especially for the virtual symposium, you will be there to present your poster, or I think you're uploading like a 2 minute thing with it, so you can verbalize a lot of things much more quickly than you could write. So right, I would say on this one, huge problem, way too many words on it. All right, so yeah, cut that back. Bullet points are a good way to start cutting back on words automatically. But even if we see like in the bullet point section, probably way too much detail per bullet point also. Just get the gist of it across. Dropping articles is a good way to save space also. Because you see, one, no one wants to read this much. And two, look how tiny the figures are. That it's tough to see. Now, again, in a digital realm, it's different because you probably can zoom in a lot easier. But if you made this physical poster, and we're standing in front of it, you want to think about, you don't want people to have to put their nose up against it to see what your figure says. So if you see like figure 3 here, the legend is so tiny on it, it's not getting anything across to us. All right, so what other issues here that you see about this poster, or good things about the poster too?
One thing I kind of notice is the title doesn't seem too catchy.
True. Yeah, it's. I would agree. It's very vague, and to be upfront, like it's tough sometimes to come up with a good title, or like I don't know how far this student got at this point. Maybe there weren't a lot of results, but right, the title is getting across very broadly what was done. So including a finding in there would be great. So wind velocity analysis around urban architectural structures. So maybe if it was I forget what this was really about, but if we see like low pressure eddies exist around sharp corners, I don't know, whatever the results are, like that would be a much catchier, grabbier title there. I would say color wise, like I don't mind this one. I think like the various shades of blue are pretty nice on it. It's not in the body, not using two colors. The figures, those are like nice, colorful figures. There are good. I would say.
Can I add something, please? Two things. I would say the location of the pictures and the caption is not good. It's kind of like empty spot around it. So definitely don't do this. Either make the picture bigger and don't have an empty spot without anything. And the other thing is the text is too close to the edge. So don't do that. If it was printing, you would have printing issue, and it's kind of like very close to the edges, and it's kind of too much for your eyes to see, to go all the way to the edges and read all the text. I mean, even if it was a small, I mean, shorter amount of text.
Yeah, I would say I like it in the template because that's how LaTeX defaults. It's using justified text. If you're using PowerPoint, you can choose if you want ragged right edge like this or justified. For everything I do, I prefer justified. I think I'm probably in the minority in that. Um, I've seen some studies that say that ragged right edge is actually easier to look at. So that's a stylistic choice. But for a poster, especially, I do like a justified text myself. And like here, the author chose to go with 2 columns, which might be appropriate, but 3 columns might be nicer because then you can have these figures be the entire width of a column, and it's not going to look weird. So here with the 2 column, because there's so much text, there should be less of it. Let's start there. And if the figures were bigger, they would be probably maybe even too big if they're taking up a whole column. And also then you can have like the captions underneath to do it properly to build on what Dr. Panah said. I would say something I do like here that I didn't mention is this picture at the bottom. If you can see my mouse, figure 2. I do like the labeling there when you have an experimental setup. That's really important to do if you did. Now, a lot of you probably didn't do anything experimental. Well, some of you did. I know my student probably has some sort of setup. So labeling all the pieces of it is really a really nice thing to do. All right, in the interest of time, let's move on to another poster. Okay. All right. Comments, thoughts on this poster, good or bad? I tried to pick a mixed bag from the last couple years in the posters we're looking at.
On the top, they didn't really include any like their personal information or like who
I
they're working.
removed that.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, under the title was the authors.
Okay.
But I did not get permission to show any of these, which I should have done. So yeah, that was there. I would point out in the references, and when I show you my poster, you'll see this on a poster. You can really put like first author's last name and like journal and year is often enough for the references. Here, like it's taking up too much room. So basically, the bare minimum number information you need that you could find the paper you're referring to. So you could reduce these references by probably 60% by putting very bare minimum. So that's one thing. I would point out here, maybe it is, I guess the spacing is consistent for the headers. At first glance, it didn't look like it was.
I'm not sure how I feel about the color scheme. It's not the most visually pleasing.
Yeah, I would say maybe something that's a little bit like these two shades of blue near each other. I don't know if I love, I think it's a good point that would be, even for me who nitpicks all these posters, which is a pastime of mine, I don't mind it too much. But yeah, reducing it to like a good 3-color scheme that works together might have worked nicer here. And I think even on that website I showed you, I think there's ways you can do like different shades of blue if that's what you want. I don't know if these two blues necessarily complement each other or not. I really don't have an eye for design like that. But that's why I rely on those that I assume the professional that made that website knows more than I do for complementary colors. I'd say overall, I don't mind this poster, which I don't know, most of them I do have a lot to say about.
Maybe like a transparent RAU logo thing.
Yeah, that is a little weird there with the white. So making it a transparent GIF might be good. I think they give you a PNG as the default. So yeah, if you're gonna have a color behind it, I'd say transparent's the way to go. Also, this is nitpicky, but the size of the REU logo should probably be roughly the same size as the Penn State Berks logo. It's kind of just weird having them different sizes. So I'm getting a little bit into the weeds here. The way the figures are set up, I don't mind too much. Maybe figure 1, it's just a little small. It looks weird there. But one thing I would say is this has a lot less text than like the previous one, but you could even go further. So there, like you can really go with a razor blade and cut out. Again, let's cut out unnecessary verbs, like cutting out to be verbs is one way. Again, we can reduce on space and articles and things that really get our point across. I think important, subjective, that can be taking up less room. All of these words can take up even less room than is here. But overall, not a bad poster. I think some of these I chose somewhat at random. Any other thoughts on this poster? I have one more example here. It's the wrong Penn State logo. Make sure you are not using, or that you're using, I think, just the Penn State Berks logo with the newish lion head and the REU one. I think in one template they gave one year, they had old logos there, but don't use those. I think in our REU folder, we have the ones that you should be using. Let's say if you want to use PowerPoint to do it, use this Penn State Berks logo, not that other logo. So oops, going back to poster C, yeah, like these two logos I think are the ones you should be using. So that's one thing that was fixed. This is the draft version of this poster.
This isn't really anything specific, but just like in general, like if I'm walking by, I feel like I'm not really going to notice this. There's nothing that jumps out at me that makes me want to look at it. There's nothing that grabs my attention.
I think like the thermal image is nice. I think like color anything with false color, I think, draws the eye and gets people excited. So right, it's I think actually the final version of this changed a decent amount from this one, and actually this went on to win Best Poster 2 years ago. So the bones of this one I do like, but it was significantly improved even from here. All right, so let's think about the plots here. So probably some of you are using MATLAB or generating plots in something. So what's wrong with figure 3 and even figure 4?
They have a white background when the poster's a white background. Originally, I didn't even think figure 3 was there because, or at least the graph for it, because it's light compared to the background.
Yeah, I think the white background is probably not the main issue. It appears to be an issue. What's a bigger issue? That probably even having a white background would be fine.
I think the big issue there is you can't see the axis labels or
Right,
any
it's
of
super
the
tiny. Right. So
Exactly.
one issue with MATLAB is the default text is typically too small for anything. I think the default size is like 10 point. So if you're using MATLAB or generating plots somehow, make sure you're specifying the font size. So if you're putting it into a paper or like a presentation, probably there a font size of like 12 or 14 is okay. You'll have to play with it. But on a poster, you want it even larger. Because again, like I have no idea what figure 3 is saying. I see like a couple of dim lines. You can also specify the line width, which might be helpful. But other than that, like figure 3 means nothing to me unless I zoom in super far. Figure 4, I think the lines are better, but there's no legend on it. Actually, there's no legend on either of those, which is a problem. And again, the axis labels are really, really small. So anytime you're using MATLAB to make a plot, you need to specify font size. Almost never do you want the default to be there. I would say, again, a nitpicky thing is in figure 4, let me just zoom in so we can see what it says. Figure 4, ooh, that's really bad. I don't know. Maybe that's an artifact and not there. You don't need titles for your figures in MATLAB if you're going on a poster. The caption will serve as the title, so you can save some room there. But yeah, this version of it, I don't know why it has 2 labels on it. Maybe that's a PDF thing. But yeah, way too small. You should be able to, from this distance, let me go back to full screen. From this distance, you should be able to read what things say. And if you can't, make them bigger. That is your font size for the body text, for your headers, and for axes, labels, and captions there. Yep. So make it visible from afar. And here too, the references, he has a ton of stuff there that can be reduced further to take up even less room. He's using a lot of colors, but I think they actually do work pretty well together here. So again, if you're using that like a 5-color or 6-color palette, if they all complement each other, I think you can get away with it without being too much of a concern. I like figure 2. I like that like CAD image there is nice. I will say figure 1 is probably someone else's figure that he did not generate, nor was in a paper by their advisor. Don't put other people's pictures in your poster. In a presentation, you can kind of get away with it as long as you acknowledge the source. I would say a poster, if you don't own the rights to the image, don't put it on your poster. So I figure 1, unless it's like if it's adding a lot of value and it's like a Creative Commons license, that might be fine. But otherwise, just avoid it so you're not running into any sort of copyright issues. And finally, and then we can have some more discussion if you want. So this is just a poster that I thought turned out decently well that I made. The spacing I don't love, and the size is a little bit different. But this is, again, trying to get across here. Now here, Dr. Rudy and I were both from the same department, so I didn't need, I wasn't in kinesiology at the time. Actually, and title, not great there. But I think here I was trying to be very conscious of reducing the amount of text I had in the body. I probably could have gone even further here. But I think here the images start to tell the story here. I have a table that kind of summarizes it. You can see here the references is a little bit small from here, but the references are kind of the bare minimum of what you want to include. So again, be thinking about these things as you're putting the poster together, especially if you're working in PowerPoint where moving things around becomes difficult. So if you kind of make your poster and it's very, very wordy, and then you go and you like how it looks, but then you go back and cut out like half of the words, you're going to have to go back and restructure the whole spacing of the poster, which can become a real pain. So think about those things from the get-go to reduce some of the shifting around you might have to do later. All right, so that's all I have, I believe, as far as some prepared stuff.